Okay, I see that we're 2 minutes past the hour, so let's get started. Welcome again, everybody, to this webinar on the Power Platform licensing. Today, I'm super happy to have Ralph Rivas with me. How are you doing, Ralph?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much, Vlad.
Thank you. And Ralph is really one of the few people that really understand that. So I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from this session as well. Just a few housekeeping rules. This webinar will be recorded, and all of the recording as well as different resources will be sent to everybody by end of day tomorrow. Also, at the bottom of your screen, you should have a Q&A button. Please don't hesitate to use it. Ask your questions, and I will be asking, I'll try to do all of them to Ralph, either at the end of the webinar or in the middle, depending on the timing. And that's it. I'm not going to talk anymore for now, and I'm going to leave the spotlight to Ralph. So Ralph,
Thank you. Let's get a good old PowerPoint over here. I think folks can see what's going on. So let's bring it up. So by the way, normally Vlad talks money. Now Vlad is talks money when he's not talking tech. So guess what? This sounds like a good thing for you, right, Mr. Vlad?
I got the domain, vladtalksmoney.com.
That's right. Wow. That's hey, it actually works. Give it a try, folks. But maybe after the show. In the meantime, over here, we're talking about understanding the Power Platform. So let's go take a look at this and let's see what this session's about. Essentially, our session goals over here, we're looking at those cost nuances, the various scenarios and combinations. And if you don't mind, I will go a little fast. If you'd like me to slow down, do raise your hand or let Vlad know. But to be sure, this will be recorded, which means you can play it back later and slow it down so we can get going. There's a lot to cover over here. Actually, this could probably take a whole afternoon if I were to deep dive that crazy big document. But let's see. In scope for now, though, we're just going to cover Power Apps, Power Automate, and the new virtual agents. And we're going to hopefully apply what we've learned going forward. All right, so a little really very fast thing about myself. Essentially, Ralph Rivas over here. I am what's called a Microsoft aficionado. Yes, like Microsoft, like fine wine gets good after so many years since when I've redacted the date because it's just so long ago. I am, oddly enough, I was telling Vlad this yesterday. I am MCP 1613. I have a 4-digit MCP or certification, which is like a long time ago. And I think only maybe Bill is one higher than I am at this point. I've been consulting or essentially in the so-called dark side since 2000 with my company Magenics in 2002. So I've been doing this for a while. I'm an accidental SharePoint guy because some folks might remember .NET Nuke, that little example application. I think it was called it's like ASP.NET application that they had out there. And they said, hey, you know that, maybe you know SharePoint. So suddenly in 2003, I got thrust upon it. And that's basically leads to this, right? Solution architect by day, crazy dad and entertainer by night. And you can see there's one of my mentoring subjects over here. Yes, I'm a collaboration evangelist, which basically it's a fanboy for the Office 365 stuff. The mentoring path, yes, of course, there's my mentor, one of my mentor people right there showing in the picture, just so you know. And we shall proceed. All right, and meanwhile, here's a very important thing, is you have to think about when you're about to see the things that you're about to see, is the role that you're looking at it. Maybe you're just interested, well, what is it about? Are you the money person? Are you the IT person or the citizen developer? When you're asking your questions, you want to perhaps phrase them in that context because it actually does make a difference of whether or not either you care about it or whether or not it actually will affect you. All right, so just give that a thought of why we're here besides having to work from home and have nothing else better to do. All right, let's let Microsoft speak to the story. And we saw earlier we had the licensing guide that was up. Essentially, the official licensing guide has all the information. It's about 30 pages worth of fine print and other details. All right, and but there are links that essentially take you there. And I have them right over here as links, and we can actually take a look and move our way to them. Let me go quickly to some of those links. Right over here, for example, the Power Automate pricing list is over here. It's showing for Power Apps, and here's Power Automate. Yes, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agents. Actually, Power Virtual Agents doesn't have a pricing page. You actually have to go through the page and find pricing down at the bottom. And then they go even further into things like AI Builder, which we're going to cover later on. All right, so just a quick note on those. If you want to try to get a hold of those in front of you right now or on your second screen, it probably is a good idea. You can just type in pricing, it'll take you there. In my case, I have my ENUS links that take me right there. And it gets you to the same place if you take out the ENUS for whatever country you're coming from. And of course, there is a PDF download. I haven't seen this in a doc yet. So let's go talk about these links over here. Pricing is separate from the licensing information. This is important. This is not meant to confuse you or make you look several places. If you think about it, the prices you saw, and a lot of what we're going to talk about here is in US dollars. I'm sorry, we're coming in from that area, but that's my region right now, so it's really hard for me to show some of the other ones. That being said, if you're in a different place, you will see your own pricing related to your area. So this is actually a good thing. So they can actually make different prices for different areas if they have to. And of course, availability might make a difference. There are something that you probably want to know is that these pricing links that you saw, they are hiding the nuances. So remember we looked at those pages, it had a big $10 per month or $50 for something or 15, whatever it is. They are hiding nuances. And there's 30 pages of licensing guide of nuances. And then you have those big boxes. So it is literally the case of here's a big sign. Now come down and look at those small prints. So we have to, this is really the reason why we have to understand things before we click on those buttons and say, let's just go do it. All right. Oh, so by the way, the pricing can also be found in your Office admin site for those who have the power. And pun is intended over here, who have the power of your tenant to be able to look around. You can find it in your admin site. So let me go show you what that looks like. We'll come in, for example, this is the admin screen for Office 365. I type in the word power, and let's see here's all the Power to Power Apps plans, the Power Automated plans. They're all here, Power BI, whatever you're looking for is found very quickly over here. By the way, so this is in billing purchase services is where you would find this particular item. I had a link that took me right there, so that was okay. All right, let's see. So the result may not match the documentation exactly. Let me explain what that means. If you click on your admin site and you see a number that's perhaps different than what you see in the Microsoft pricing sheet, there's probably a reason for that. And it probably has something to do with your tenant. So if you're not the person with the power, you're probably going to want to ask that person, the admin, what does it say when you get that license? Is it the same? It'll usually, I think 99% of the time it will be exactly the same. But there probably will be instances where it's not, especially in very large companies that are making their own deals. So older plans, by the way, you'll find in there as well. So there are some folks that are still grandfathered in, as they call it, to those older plans, and they might see them. And they're also showing them just for the pipe. Let me get back over here. That went ahead. Somehow it decided to go ahead of me. All right, really quickly, there's also regional nuances that might be there in that particular site. That's something that is very important to know about. And again, whoever's got the control of the tenant as the administrator for licensing should give you the bottom line of what that is. Always check to see what you have and what's included. All right, before diving in, some things that you probably also want to look at, and this is part of that, is what your licensing program is. How do you buy Power Platform services? There's some people are allowing this so-called self-service where as soon as you make a Power App and you click on a button, you're going to get a little dialog box that says, hey, how would you like to pay for this? Oh, wow, this thing keeps moving ahead of me. There's a ghost here pressing my buttons. Let's go back. And the other one, of course, is if you know your Microsoft rep. This is perhaps the best advice to have in general for any licensing thing that you're doing. If you're a small organization, there's not much going on. Well, if you don't know who that rep is, maybe not so bad. But in most cases, Microsoft will provide somebody that you can talk to. All right, let's proceed here. The licensing program options to see what you have. Some of the things you got to look and see what kind of volume licenses you have, whether or not the service to cloud offerings, and essentially that can make a difference. It's the enterprise agreements is what these are. Let's go quickly. And some of the other ones that can affect it, whether or not you're using, you have a government setup, some things may not be available. So these things may affect not so much the licensing, but just availability of what it is that you're trying to do. Let's move along. Hey, let's go see Power Apps right now. All right, on Power Apps, we saw this earlier. And this is the main two boxes that they give you. And they have buy now and try it for free. The so-called run single apps and run unlimited apps. So this will be different, of course, for your country. And let's find out what we get for that. The so-called run single apps, yes, per user, per app, per month. In this particular case, the example is $10. All right, the individual users get to run specific applications. That seems to make sense. They consider that the good old standalone license when they're talking about it. Then the concept of running unlimited apps is per user per month at $40. Essentially, all the power apps that you get to run. This is sort of like somebody else is building 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 apps. You can have at them, play with them, use them, and you're okay. Now, these are also called premium licenses, and we'll cover what that gives you in just a moment. And then this is a very important concept going forward, the concept of the seeded power apps. All right, and this is seeded. We're going to see this in Power Automate as well. These are bundled with Office 365 or Dynamics 365. The concept is if you're already an Office 365 tenant, which you likely are if you're using Power Apps, or Dynamics 365, there are some things that you get with this. In other words, you probably don't have to pay that $10 because you can do some 365 stuff off the bat without having to pay it. So very, very important thing. So there's no extra costs, but there are, of course, limits to what you can do. And, of course, there's customizing or extending things when 365, either Office or Dynamics, is really the purpose of this. They don't want you to have to charge you for something that should be natural, just like when you did workflow, good old workflow with SharePoint lists and things like that. Let's look at that Power Apps per app plan. What do you get for that $2 a month? Let's take a look over here. We see all these checkboxes. So this is essentially a premium plan where you're getting a lot of things over here. But let me point out a couple of things. So this is interesting. You don't, remember I said per app plan, but wait a minute. You can have 2 apps per plan. Maybe they should have said the per 2 apps plan, but I think that sounds hard to say. So Microsoft calls it the per app plan when in reality it's actually 2 apps. And they talk about a Canvas or model-driven app. We're not going to get into exactly what those are, but let's just say for simplicity, Canvas is your regular Power Apps plan, and your model-driven is the things that are created from the AI model builder, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, but that's almost its own topic that's going to be maybe covered at some point later on. All right, that's what you get for that. Another thing to look at is the capacity over here. Capacity for this thing called the Common Data Service, and we'll cover what that is in a little bit. It's something that came out of Dynamics 365 as a common area for data to be maintained instead of you having like your own SQL server or something else. It's a very powerful tool. But this is the key over here. When we look at this, and this is right from the guide, they'll have these footnotes that give you these other nuanced details. You want to pay attention to those when you're deciding what you want to do, especially if you're dealing with Dynamics 365 or if you're dealing with the capacity for the particular database, because those kind of rules can actually add up and hurt you later on. All right, so that's just something to consider. This is the low entry point of the premium plans, sometimes also known as the P1 plan. All right, let's look at that $40 a month plan. Okay, so what's big here? Well, here we go. Custom apps, we have unlimited, just basically, there is just no limit. Just go whatever you can do. The concept of the custom portal. Oh, I think I skipped that a little bit on the other one. Actually, I did that on purpose because we will cover that later. The concept of the portal is its own topic, so we'll talk about that later. But for now, that's one of the biggest differences between this and the last one. The other one gave you a single portal for that app. This one says I can access a custom portal. That means the tenant will get a single portal that everyone can use. And that's what they mean. Essentially, access to that is unlimited. All right. Other things that you have over here, you see that capacity has sort of increased. There is a site, aka m.ms/platform limits, that they refer to you in that little sub footnote that you see right over there, that you can get details on what those limits are. But if you think about it, you saw the limits from earlier. In fact, well, we don't have to go there, but we saw the limits from earlier. It doesn't seem that much more than what you had as an individual. Well, the idea over here is like as a group, this is from the tenant level now, as a group, everyone's going to be combining into one area. If this is a common data service, well, commonly you might have a common set of data that's useful for the entire organization. For an individual, they're doing their own thing. They might have whatever they need for their own thing. But in a common way, let me go back for a moment. I think I know what's going on. When you go back for a moment, in a common way, everyone's going to find things in a certain area. They probably don't need as much because they're sharing the information. If you need more, you get more capacity. But for now, we're only going to give you about 4 times because we figured that should be fine for what you're doing. All right, let's continue here. Now, let's look at those seeded apps. So here's the concepts with the Dynamics 365, which is the overlap, the first of the overlap flavors. And we see over here, we have run standalone apps in the very top where it says Canvas model driven. You'll see that for basic applications, essentially, it's not included. But for the enterprise applications, it is included. So that means you want to do something very basic with Dynamics, you actually have to have a license if you want to run those apps going forward. But for these higher level applications, and they have there in the footnotes, they'll tell you what those are, and we'll look at those later on. You'll be able to, it's just included, so you don't have to pay that $10 or $40. And you'll see, of course, you'll have your connectors. We talk about what connectors are in a little bit, and we have those available. That's included. Let's go see what else over here that's important that may make a difference. A lot of this basically says that if you're with Dynamics, you don't have to pay the extra if you have this going. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that you're going to get $10 and you're going to be able to do this with Dynamics. It's the reverse. If you have Dynamics, you don't need to buy the Power Apps license. Okay, so just to give you an idea, for Dynamics 365, these are the qualifying licenses that you would have to have for this. This is in the guide, so I'm going to put this up here, but just know that you'll find this in the guide to say, if I have this, I know that I'm probably not going to have to pay that $10 or $40 situation. All right, let's look at the Office. Well, Office, this is the first thing we notice. This is the first sticker shock to some of the old IT folks is like, hey, look what's not included. This is where they get you, right? It's like, okay, so many things are not included. And you'll notice, for example, it's running custom apps. You can make as many as you want. This is important. They want you to use Power Apps and Office, and they want you to do this freely and have fun. You're already paying for that Office license. We want to empower you to do things. So we're giving you unlimited ability. However, model-driven apps, which is the AI-based stuff, well, not so much that, because that has things that it has to do in the back in Azure or wherever else they use up capacity. So that's not included. Access to the custom portals sort of doesn't make sense. Here's your SharePoint. Here's your other areas. So the custom portals is not in context of Office 365. Technically speaking, you have things there. So the custom portal is not something they're going to show. The standard connectors, we're going to look at that a little bit later. So this is a big deal. We're going to now discuss the concept of the standard connectors versus the premium connectors. The standard connectors is a limited set of things you can actually do, but actually it's limited, but a lot of very important stuff. It's the premium connector things that a lot of us were used to using that suddenly we have to have, which suddenly makes us have to have that extra license we have to think about. And we'll cover that in a little bit. The concept, just in case you're wondering, on-premise data gateway, that means if you want to talk to on-premises items, that's usually like a premium item. I just want to talk to an on-premises SQL Server or whatever it is that's out there. That's what that means. Custom connectors, making your own connectors, that's similar. We can cover that later. And you'll notice the common data service is not included in there. Again, because that's not so much, it's a Dynamics piece. But it just simply says that if you're doing something with Office 365, your resources for doing that kind of work should be what's in Office 365. So a SharePoint list versus, say, a database. All right. Power Automate user rights. So this is interesting. And this is a very important dot. It's almost like the smallest dot in here. If you have a Power App that's calling a flow that's going to work through any of these things, your Power Automate is included, so you don't have to get a license for that. We'll discuss that further when we get to Power Automate again. All right, so there's no capacity for CDS because basically you can't really use it for that one unless you get the premium license. And they have, of course, a daily request limit across the, this is across the tenant, so we can go through. All right, let's move through and see. These are your licenses that you should have for Office 365. What just basically the essentials, your E5, your E3. These are the ones that are available that will give you essentially that level. So if you don't want to pay that $10 or $40 and you only need to do what was in that list we saw earlier, these are the licenses that you need to have. All right, and remember that Appendix B over there. You saw that was like Appendix B was just sitting there, looked like, hey, maybe that's going to tell me what my apps are or what they're not. Actually, that Appendix B is simply calling out what people used to do before. People used to do like SQL Server, for example, and I'm highlighting that one because that one's the first one that my people got mad at me for. So, hey, wait a minute, we used to do SQL Server all the time. Why can't we do it? Why is it a premium? Why do we have to pay? It's like, oh, they all got mad. It's like, well, there's a reason for it, but for now, this is an example of the appendix coming to say what you used to not pay for or consider normal is now a premium. So you need to come back and take a look at this right over here. But of course, we can look at those connectors over here in the flow. They have a flow site over here. Let's go take a look and quickly, if I can quickly scan over there. Let's go take a look.
Hey, Ralph.
Yes,
sorry,
go ahead.
Quick question.
Sure, yes.
Can you elaborate on the Office 365 daily request limit?
Oh, very good. So daily request limits is how many times it actually runs or actually makes a call to something. So think about it. I hit the button and it's actually going to do something like, say, put some data into like a SharePoint list. So that whole action, even if it calls a workflow or whatever it has to do from beginning to end until that action's over, is your daily, is a request. You're actually making something happen and it counts as one. And in some cases, like the daily request limit is either on the case of the per app basis, or if when you have the entire tenant will be like limited to how many can be done in the area. And then essentially now we would buy capacity to be able to do more of that. When I get to capacity later on, that daily request limit will come back and I'll hopefully help you understand where that comes into play, especially because the daily request limit, or rather the monthly request limit, went from a small number to like almost unlimited because the monthly became the daily, and that will come up shortly. One second.
Awesome.
Pardon me. All right, where was I? Yes, the connectors. If you go to usflow.microsoft.com, basically your, excuse me, my admin screen for Flow, I can actually look at my connectors over here, and now I can get a list of here's my standard, and here my premium. And this will tell you what is standard and what customs, and I shouldn't have any on my dev tenant. Yes, I don't have any on this dev tenant. But this is where you look. If you're not sure if something is standard or premium, you look over here. When you're building your flow, you should know right away whether or not you're using a standard or a premium one. And remember, this only matters if you're trying to do it, quote unquote, for free with Office 365. All right, so, and that's a good page to have handy. All right, let's look at that Power App Portal. Let's take a look at that. Essentially, Power App resource that has licensing much like a web portal application. They added this item essentially because people wanted to have a place where people can come and get their Power Apps that could be externally shared, like in a traditional way. It's like, hey, come get your apps over here. Here's a place for it. It's very important because it's not a SharePoint website. Some people might think, hey, it's probably a SharePoint website, so you have all the bells and whistles with that. No, this is literally its own system. So this is a very important thing to know. I just want to not so much lower the expectation. I want to set your expectation on what that is. And when you get to learn it, you'll find out more. Specific use cases, essentially when you're there, and you get it whether you want it or not. So if I get a per app license or I get unlimited apps, I'm going to have this, whether or not I'm going to use it, just so you know. You can't say, I don't want it. Can I get a free discount because I don't want it? Nope. No choice for that. All right, so important to understand with Power Apps Portal, it's all about end user types. And here's the concept of the external user, whether they're coming in, the so-called anonymous user. Wow, anonymous user using a Power App. Very interesting concept. Not going to get into the technical details behind that, but that's just something that makes this, let's just say, this offering very, very useful for some folks. The concept of the internal user, usually where they're coming in with Power Apps, or they need dynamics or everything else. The employee self-serve, they're coming in to find an app. That's what it's still useful for that. People can still do that. They don't have to. You can just give them a link, say, to your Power App, and you're good to go. And the licensing scheme over here is based on the per login, the concept of the per page view. And this is, again, also in the licensing guide, but this is the important aspect when you're trying to understand it. Again, it's included with your Power Apps license, so you don't have to say pay something extra for it unless you're talking about capacity. Let's look at our use rights over here. In the case of the use rights for our items over here, It just basically says what you can do. If you're a team member, you have no use right for that. Remember what we saw earlier? Office 365, just users by itself, cannot use it unless they have a license. So you'll see you need special licenses to be able to use it. And that's what this is all about. All right, so as far as the capacity, it's about page views and logins. That's what we talked about. And we will cover this later. I'm going to stop for a moment. We had that one question there. Is there any other questions that are sitting in the queue in regards to the Power Apps side of things before I proceed?
So there is one question.
Yep.
Do consumers of apps and flows need to be licensed the same as builders and owners?
No, they do not. That's just, they do not. The users of the apps and flow, in fact, when we go into the scenarios later, you'll find out why.
Perfect.
Right?
Actually, just another question came on. I was asking this one, and it's exactly the same. So
yes.
Awesome.
All right, great. All right, so Power Automate, let's go there. And let's look at that one. Okay, so Power Automate, this is what they used to call Flow. This is called Power Automate. And you'll see over here, by the way, they're still calling it Flow because this one, the Power Automate plan at $15 creates unlimited. You can create unlimited flows. Okay, so the word flows is still there. But the product is called Power Automate. So please don't call them Power Automates. Please call them flows. That's what they're supposed to be called. And this is a different kind of plan, right? So they have a per user plan over here. And then they have a per flow plan, which is like a bundled way of running things like for an enterprise. So that's a big difference in the way the apps get. But let's take a look at what you get for these plans. The so-called plan at, in this case, $15 a month. And you'll notice the case of the individual users be able to create unlimited flows. This is different. Remember we were talking about earlier, in fact, that question was like, for a user of a flow, do they have to pay? It's like, wait a minute, that $15 a month is for someone to actually create a flow. If you're just a user of a flow, you're not paying for it. Someone else is, like the creator, and at some point, but not you. You're not paying to use the flow, but people are paying to be able to create flows, right? So for you guys, citizen developers that are creating flows, you're the folks that need to be licensed. In not all cases, but that's true. All right, so that's the standalone. For the per flow plan, 5 flows at $500 per month. Essentially, it's $100 a flow, U.S. price-wise. All right, so this is implementing the flows. This is different. This is not, I'm a person, I've created a flow, and I'm going to put it out there like this one. This means implementing the flow. So when they say reserved capacity, they say that in the notes, and I want to explain that. Essentially, it means that they're setting it up so that this thing will run, and it will run very efficiently because they know it's coming, and because you're paying that license, Microsoft somewhere in the back end has done fancy stuff to make that thing happen. You shouldn't care about it. Let the Azure folks figure that out. It serves unlimited users, and this is bold in the document. They actually have that listed out there. Remember we said you're a user, you don't have to worry about that one. That's your standalone license. And then now the concept of the seeded flow. Again, bundled with Office 365 or Dynamics. Again, no extra cost. If it's a flow that happens to be going through or using stuff that's in that area, the so-called standard connectors or the connectors for that, it's just included. I want to show you this is a very important thing because folks are here sometimes to learn, hey, I was paying this before. Now I'm paying that. Let's look at those old ones. The older plans had a monthly limit. Take a look at that. 750 runs per month in that free one. 450 runs per month. And then remember earlier we were looking at that daily request limits. Remember those? 2,000, maybe 1,500 per day. All right. What a huge difference, right? And then you have these concept of the checks. How often does it check or look at stuff? That's gone. Those in those particular cases, people used to pay little money to start, but they would add capacity, especially for big companies and everything else. Microsoft figures that we're saving you money, right? Because we're giving you a lot to run at this bulk level. So that means you're not going to have to keep paying for a little capacity here and there to go through. So this is a big deal because now that, if you recall, the entry point now is $15. Essentially, that flow plan 2 is now the entry point for the individual user as opposed to these current areas. They used to have the flow free. What a name for it, right? The flow free was really now part of the Office 365 and everything else. They probably shouldn't have been a product, but that's what it is. You might see it still in your plans, but hopefully those are going to be gone. All right, so now the limits make a difference. Let's take a look at this one. The per user offer. When it says enabled flows, I can make as many flows as I want. when I'm paying the per user area. And take a look at this, 5,000. Basically, the flow can run 5,000 times on make 5,000, I should say, API requests that they're talking to something. And every time flow runs, it's talking to an API of some sort. 5,000 of those per day. What a huge difference from that 750 maximum, or even that those maximums that we're showing earlier. Huge difference. And by the way, you can buy capacity for the daily. If that's still not enough for you, well, heck, they're going to sell you capacity. We'll talk about that later. Next, on the per flow offer, where you're buying those flows in the bundle. Essentially, the minimal purchase, of course, is 5 units. And check it out. It increases now to 15,000 API requests per license flow. So if it's 5 units, so 15,000 times 5, there's your limits. So here's a very important concept that we need to understand, though. The concept of what's called the top level flows. This is a very important for that per flow plan. The flows that count over here, they have a listing in the guide of what they are. The concept of scheduled flows, automated flows, instant flows, and business process flows. Just remember that these are $100 per additional unit every time you add them. All right, you're not purchasing capacity, right? You're just purchasing units, right? So you're actually purchasing a flow in that particular case. So just remember, capacity is a different add-on cost. Here's the most important concept. The child flows, if you have a flow that's calling another flow, you don't need an additional license. So I have, I basically have 5 flows that are running, but I have actually maybe 10 flows that are out there. A few of them are flows that are called from each other. I'm only paying for the 5 because those are the only ones that ever run. These other ones that were created by somebody else, that might have been created, that might have had its own cost, but they don't have to charge for those over here. This is a big concept. If one flow calls another, it doesn't count. Also, remember that API request limit. If a main flow calls a child flow, that counts as 1 API request, not a 2, for example. All right. Let's take a look at what you get for those plans, the $15, 15 and 500 in this particular case. All right, this is pretty straightforward. So we saw those limits. It asks if there's a license required. Yes, a license required for the individual person creating flows. Remember, creating. Runs the workflow, so that seems obvious. The business process flows, we saw that. And you can see the connectors are, in this case, when you get the premium service, they're included. Some people might do flows or automate stuff without Power Apps. What would be an example for that? I add a flow to a SharePoint list or to an activity. You add, I want to do an approval, right? And there's no form, there's no Power App, there's nothing to it. That's a flow. All right. So why would people have, for example, the per app flow, the per user plan, or even the bundle plan versus, say, the Power App one, which includes the flow underneath, is because they don't have a Power App. All right. Very important. Other things over here, there's capacity, but they look pretty much similar to what you would do with Power Apps. Essentially, you have this when you don't have a Power App, they're running on their own, and in the background, this is what you get. All right, let's take a look. So Power Automate with Power Apps. Okay, this is a very important thing over here. In the old way, the Power Apps is effectively, when you bought the Power Apps, you got the flow automatically. This made sense. You paid once for everything and you were done. And that's the part where people got confused. They thought that when they had this, you were fine. But again, the plan, because of the plan types, you still had those limits. So if the limit said so many per month and everything else, you still had these problems. So they had to make that change. Essentially, in the new way, they're the only free use of flow. These are the free uses of flow that are over here. Limited the concept of the Power App, right? So I have a Power App license. I'm putting it through. The trigger action for the Power App, I hit the button of the Power App. It does something with flows that make something happen, like, say, send up a push notification. Flows coming from a premium Power App. So again, I paid the extra $10 a month for that Power App, right? And that means I can talk to premium connectors and things like that. That's included. You don't have to pay it. So if I'm paying the $10, I don't have to pay the additional $15. Flows that use the premium connectors not included with the Power App. That means, for example, you were like using the Office 365 Power App, and you're talking to a premium connector, let's say, like, oh, that good old SQL Server thing. That's not included. Now you have to pay, at least for that one, to make that happen. But chances are now you have to pay for both, right? But so when you don't, you actually should get a Power App. You don't get a flow. All right. Let's take a look at this Power Automate within Power Apps. As you can see, everything is included. If you get a Power App license, one of the premiums, you will get all these items right over here. So problem solved. It's not so bad. You're not paying an extra. So you will not have to pay 10 plus 15 or 10 plus 500. All right, let's take a look. If you have Dynamics, oh, this is pretty cool. With Dynamics, a lot of this is included. Dynamics really lives on flows. So let's not stay there too long. Let's take a look over here with Office 365. This is where it makes a difference. Take a look. You don't have those business process flows that are included. It's almost like those are premium type flows that have to run. This one, you have to actually look at the fine print for what they define business process flows, because that may change. But if you think of the Dynamics pieces that are part of that for your business process flows, that's what that would be. All right. Notice again, standard connectors versus premium connectors. If you're doing a flow that needs to go out into the Woolly, you need to pay. All right. No premises data gateway. Again, those make sense. For the common data services, same thing. Those should make sense. It's very similar again to the system. However, again, just like Power Apps, you can have as many as you want for running. This is, again, just like with regular, good old SharePoint, for example. You used to have workflow as part of that. They didn't charge you for using that however you wanted to use it. This is pretty much that in its new form. All right, let's hear some usage guidance. Now, for this, we need to understand trigger types. The two important trigger types is the automated flow trigger. This is triggered by something, let's say if you guys understand the concept of the webhook or a polling event. I'm just, something is running in the background and it's like looking and, oh, this happened. I just received a mail, right? All right, SharePoint created or updated something. An Exchange email was received. That's an automated flow. Okay, and the other concept is the instant flow. The instant flow is actually triggered. I hit the button. I go and I click start flow. I trigger the actual flow. These things will make a difference in how things work. So let's take a look at this. So things to think about based on those two concepts in context. We want to use the standard connectors whenever possible. If we want to like do it for free, if we're Office 365, let's try to make sure that we're using standard connectors. That'll save us a lot of money, right? Because we don't have to pay any extra. The automated triggers. This is interesting. The flow owner gets a full license, essentially, with the flow bundle. So we basically, all we have to do now is watch the capacity for things that are running over here. Automated triggers don't count against you. They're running in the background. So if an automated trigger happens because a user does something, that user does not need a license. I created a flow that's now attached to this list. I'm the creator. I created it. It's there. I'm a user. I'm 10 users. I'm 20 users. I click on that thing to start that flow, or rather, I do whatever it is that I do that triggers that automated trigger. I don't have to, as a user, care about that. For the instant flows, now here's the thing. Since I'm actively clicking to make it happen, that user does need a license. Again, remember that the seeded apps do not need this license. But if I'm doing something that's going to say hit a premium connector or everything else, well, then that user clicking or hitting that flow will need it. Again, Power App trigger would need a license for itself and negate the need for the flow license. That's a very important concept. This is where people get tripped up and think they need both the flow and the Power App license. All right, I'll stop right there before moving on. For Power Automate, is there anything sitting in the lunchbox?
Yes, so there's two questions. First one, and I'm actually going to try to answer it, see if I learned something.
Aha.
So the question is, exactly what licenses are required for premium connectors, for example, SQL? And I believe the answer is either a per app or per user one. Both of them give you access to premium connectors, right?
Correct.
Okay, so not the free, well, it's not free anymore. The included with Office 365 one is only free connectors, and any paid license gives you access to paid connectors.
Yes, that's exactly right.
There we go. Now the second one, and this one I'll let it to you. How can I monitor my consumption of daily API requests?
Okay. So I wish I showed that, but there's actually, and I wonder why this one keeps hitting itself. I'm trying to say pause.
There's somebody clicking your buttons there.
Yeah, I think so too. Here we go. Let me go right back over here. So there is a site. Remember those that flow site that I showed you earlier with the premium connectors? There are admin screens that actually show what those are, the flows that are running per day. And actually, there is a I'll show that a little bit later on. There is an admin site for you to follow and see that capacity happening, essentially as it's happening. Very, very useful. That's actually a very, very good question. We can actually go through, and I'll show that. In fact, let's go. We'll take a look at that. Remind me to look at that before we're done today.
Awesome.
All right, let's go now to Power Virtual Agents. Power Virtual Agents, the new kid on the block. This is the one that gave me sticker shock because they let us use it for free for a month or a couple of months at Ignite, and we're like, hey, this is really cool. And all of a sudden, $1,000 per month? What? What's that? 1,000? That's a lot. That's actually, so it's 2,000 sessions. That means how many times you can talk to the bot. Just in case you're not familiar with Power Virtual Agents, essentially that you can they package chatbots. Right? So instead of you building them, you can actually put them together. And so essentially it's $1,000 a month when you get this, whether you use it or not. You have 2,000 sessions or as many, let's just say how many times you can talk to the chatbot. If there are flows associated with this, this is included. You can have unlimited flows. You don't have to pay for any flows that the chatbot kicks off or tries to get going. Your 2,000 session essentially counts as when someone talks to the bot, it counts as a session. We'll talk about this in a little bit. And you could stack them. They give you the ability to stack that information. So here's the thing. A lot of people have probably built their own bots with the AI framework with Lewis and all that stuff. And you think like, hey, but I did that. It doesn't cost me anything. Actually, it does. Azure, you're being charged on the Azure side. If you haven't seen the bill for that, it's because your IT guy didn't come over and say, hey, what are you doing over here? And you haven't hit any really capacity that they would notice in cost. However, if you think about it, this is all packaged. And if people are using it to this level, yeah, someone's going to get hit. So this is why they're charging essentially money for this. This is the case of like, if you're going to pay for this, please use it. Otherwise, don't bother. All right, so let's understand what's a session. According to the doc, it says it's an interaction between the customer and the bot. Okay, that's a unit of consumption. That's fine. A session begins when an authored topic is triggered. Authored topic, I make a topic. The topic is, when do I get paid? That's a topic. And if that gets triggered, that's a session begins. The session is referred to as a build session. In this case, they're billing you. That's counting against you. They're deducted for both testing and production. So this is a very big kicker. I'm just testing. I'm just trying this out. Well, guess what? They're going to charge you anyway. And so you can't have, there is no concept of an environment for testing and an environment for production when it comes, unfortunately, to the tenant chat box. I have a feeling that might change. This might be a change that's in progress. Someone's not going to be happy about that. But this is the case there at the moment. A session ends when one of the following happens. It's considered over, questions answered, customer just said, I'm tired with you, bot, go away. Or the bot is unable to answer, I'm sorry, I don't know anything. Please click here for a live agent. When that happens, your session is over. You're going to be charged whether or not you have the answer or they close the session or it gets escalated. You are going to be charged that session. All right. Let's now go to add-ons. The add-ons to gain capacity. We talked about the fact that we can add on capacity and that the issue now on the daily API limits will come in for Power Apps, okay? Things we can add on. There's for that login, that portal that we talked about, actually has a login limit. I think it's like 5,000 or, no, not, I think it's 100 per day. I have to go back and look at that. I literally forgot about what that is right now. But it's literally giving you the ability to add like additional logons per month. And this is a per month situation because it's a web portal type scheme at $200 per month. And page views is what it's about, I told you. And every 100,000 page views that you want to do is $100. If you exceed it, you get charged. And then the concept of the AI builder. This is a very new concept. This will, when Project Cortex comes into line, by the way, this is going to be something that everyone might be using more and more. But the concept is to use that AI system. This is not the same as the power of virtual agents. To use that system, you'll be paying $500 a month for that particular add-on. And you add them on to Power Apps or Power Automate, whichever. The concept of the service credits, the currency they talk about for the AI thinking. All right. Unfortunately, there is no rate sheet for that at the moment. In fact, I was trying to put that together for my licensing blog that I was going to try to get, and it turns out Microsoft, that's still a hidden situation. It's the case of you're running it. After a month, you take a look and see how many credits you actually use. All right, that's our guide. Otherwise, there's no way to know ahead of time what that's going to be. This is basically an add-on to both of them. And Power Apps just has you can go to that link to the AI builder and check it out, and it shows you what it's about, what you get for it, and how to use it. You remember the model-driven apps? That's what this is all about. This is where the model-driven apps come from. All right. Other services you can add. This is from the purchase services area. The common data service, if you run out of log capacity, they charge you. In this particular case, I have the American prices over here. And by the way, folks that are using Dynamics, which use this service, this is a major a thing for Dynamics customers. They get this included with their service. When they need to add on for that because it's their corporate data needs it, this is the same add-on that they would use to get that capacity, right? So it's like $10 here, $2 per month for like little pieces. There's what's called a service file and database. Two different things, right? Log, or three different things. Log, I'm logging to something, just logging events. File, that means actual documents, files, text files, PDF, whatever. And this is not the same as SharePoint or OneDrive. This is literally files going into that blob storage area. And then database, which is like the traditional SQL. Here's a row of data, here's a row of data, here's a row of data using UpData. That's what those are. All right. And we were wondering where we can get all that information. Check this out. There is an admin Power Platform site. Let's go look at that. I think I'm going to keep a promise right now. Let's see how we're doing over here. One moment. Let's go find. And let's go find the Power Platform Admin Center. All right. So we saw over there, and we were wondering about things like, let's look at our, yes, so right now we're looking at my dev tenant, so I'm actually not looking at very good information, but we were asking where do we find out where we're hitting our limits, and the concept is to come over here into the analytics screens, and we can see active users, API calls, executions for Power Automate, and I have a very poor example over here because this is my dev tenant at the moment. And then this particular dev tenant is actually, I'm showing is fairly new, so there is very little activity going on over here. I wish I had my my other one going, but this is the answer to that question. How do we know how we're doing and what our usage is? You come to your admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com site and you come and see all your good stuff. From here, you can get support. You can actually manage Power Apps, Power Automate, and the Power Virtual Agents from this particular area. There's going to be data gateways where you can go to other areas and take a look at that as well. And of course, you can move to the other admin centers from here very quickly. And you can go directly to the Power Automate or Power Apps. So basically get what you can't get over here, straight up. This, if you guys don't know about this, get it, put it on your screens. If you have the power, it's good to exercise your power. All right. Alternatively, of course, we can go to the main purchase area to the main screens and we can see it. So we'll stop there for a quick checkpoint. Hey, let's pause for a moment. And we're going to look at quick scenarios over here. Any questions so far on capacity and the daily API checks? There's API capacity you can buy. I didn't show that in this particular area, but the idea is you can buy them again in bundles to be able to take a look. And let's go back here. With
There's nothing so far, and I see we have about 10 minutes left. So for everybody, put in your questions now, and we're going to attempt to finish everything on time.
Yes, we are. In fact, let's look at some quick scenarios. So let's look at a quick scenario over here. First one, let's start simple. All right, very simple. We got 5,000 people. Oh, wow, that's really simple, right? And a SharePoint list. Oh, wow, 5,000 people in a SharePoint list. The trigger is automated, all right? It's an approval flow, straight up. I made a document. There's going to be an approval for the document. The connector uses premium. So there's a connector that was built in here in this case, it's a flow, right? It's got to be a flow. It's approval flow. It's calling the Graph API. So maybe it's looking up, like, say, the role of somebody, right? The Graph API will have that. How many Power Automate licenses do we need? Any guesses? Any guesses? We just need one. Yes, the creator created one. He attached it to the SharePoint list. 5,000 people clicked and went nuts on it because the trigger underneath is automated. They did their thing on the SharePoint list. Underneath the covers, the trigger takes it on and goes, right? This is not the same as a triggered. Just because I added, say, a file that's going to be checked for approval or whatever else, I didn't really trigger it. In fact, I don't care. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't know that it needed approval. I just put it I'm just doing my job. I put the file up there. What are you asking from me? I'm just asking one premium license from the one guy that needed it. Great. All right. Let's look at another one. All right. Let's see. The citizen developer. Yes. Citizen makes 2 flows. Okay. He's got Office 365 E3. He's got 20 users that have permissions to use a form. Oh, wow. You know, just like a regular form. All right. And now the form triggers flow number one. Flow number one does something. Flow number one calls number two. Say the flow number two, again, that's talking to the good old Graph API. Maybe it's talking REST. It's HTTP. By the way, HTTP is a premium connector. All right. So what's going on here? How many licenses do we think we need? We got 20 users over here. I made the two flows. I made a SharePoint form, essentially, that's triggering the flow. Well, let's take a look. Again, this is just one premium licenses, one full license in this case. I just made this flow. I attached it to the sheet. It doesn't matter that the fact that other people are going into that form, because that's not a Power Apps, by the way. That's just a form that's out there. I'm clicking it. I'm doing whatever it is. It's talking to that piece. I just needed that one when I created it. All right. So, so here's the thing. I could be a citizen developer, or I could be like a quote unquote a service account, right? A common account that's going to run it. That's the case of the license. You know, in the case of like the multiple, the bundled flows, that's what you would have. The creator is essentially a service account. Somebody's going to create it at some point. So somebody's essentially the service that's going to make everyone happy. Let's look at another super basic one. Here's the one that I actually checked with Microsoft Sales as recently as yesterday. Citizen developer has a Power App license. Yes, I have the $10 one, the little one. Or rather, it's not so little because it's unlimited apps. Okay, I want that flow to talk to that SQL Server DB. It's up in the cloud. Well, keep in mind that I've done everything. I have done my homework. Obviously, I have a license for it. I'm using it. It's in Azure. I couldn't be using it unless I'm able to deal with it. So clearly, I have that license, so no issue over there. By the way, there's a concept of what's called multiplexing. I'm only just dropping that little term over here. If you are talking to SQL Server, especially on premises, be very careful, because there are license implications when you attempt to use Flow and these kind of tools to use many users to talk to those things. Double check those very carefully. That is out of our scope over here. That's more of a SQL Server type thing. All right. Do they still need a license? Do I still need that $15 license? After all, here's my flow. I'm talking to that premium pieces. I got my Power App license. Do I still need it? No, they do not. It's included. Yes, it's included with the seated license. Originally, in fact, this confused me. When I first saw the license change, one of my IT guys came over and said, hey, why am I'm now paying $25 for this? You know, I was only paying $5 for you guys before. It's like, well, now you're paying 10, but you're getting more capacity. All right. So the price went up, but it didn't go up to 25, sir. It did not. It's included. Relax. Don't worry. Okay. Let's apply what we know. Let's look at this. We got an Office 365 freebie. Last year, dozens of people out of a 10,000 size org made flows. Everyone, somebody said, hey, check this out, flows, go make some. And people were making flows to their heart's content, the power users usually. So hundreds of flows were created. Well, few of them really ever ran because people were writing them, but they're just not really, everyone's playing. So they never really hit that 750 runs capacity that we saw on that item. So nobody really noticed that there was all these flows sitting about. None of those apps were promoted to others in any formal fashion. So people didn't go out and say, hey, check out my flow, or hey, let's use this flow. None of that was going on. So, what would we do over here? What would this cost? So let's think about this first. This is the case of we want to clean up before we move forward. All right. If hardly any of these are using capacity, we're probably going to want to find out. And using those tools, maybe we can go back and look at that admin screen and we can say, hey, what's being used and to what extent? Maybe some of them are really, really being used. Because if they are, then we want to consider of those what kind of license they should have. It's very likely that there may be hundreds of flows, and chances are maybe a dozen of them are actually useful. So maybe we want to consider the bundled package when we're putting that together, because with the bundled package, unlimited users can make use of them, because that might be the case. We might find out that these are all power users using stuff for themselves, and then we'll from our questioning of them, we'll decide that okay, they're going to get the individual license for the 5 or 6 that true power users that are doing it, and just simply eliminate the rest of them. So that's that case. Let's just do one other one. Flow Runner. So somebody created a critical business application. Last year, they only had 3 flows, but they ran them heavily. They had what's called the plan 2 that flows, essentially that what was the quote unquote $15 plan. And of course they wanted to have the capacity, but they would always, or sometimes hit that daily or monthly limit requiring the purchase of additional capacity. So they were, in peak periods, they would like be buying and paying for extra. They were connecting to SQL Server, so that means they were doing premium stuff, so they're doing their updates. They had hundreds of users all over the globe using it daily. And now, this is the kicker here. When I say hundreds of users are using it, remember, it's just a flow, okay? And the application will be calling, however it's launching that flow. This is not a Power App. The application is calling that flow. These hundreds of users are using it, but they're not the creators of that flow. All right. So right off the bat, we're probably looking at best, a bundled flow situation, or a creator situation where have the creator create those one flows, right? And they're running it. We don't have to have hundreds of licenses for these people using it all over the world, even though it's connected to a SQL database for updates. So this is actually a good one. Whether or not it's hitting the capacity, guess what? According to the new way, they're not going to hit these capacity pieces again. So that's a good thing we can tell them. All right, one more. Okay, the One App Shop. This one little consulting firm has a reporting app. It talks to a database because the creator who also did it was a developer. So, hey, they did SQL. That was their thing. Inconsistent use. They have maybe 20 to 40 project managers every so often. Once a week, they're going to use it. There's 1,000 people in that tenant, mostly unaware. They don't have any idea that this stuff even exists because they're developing, but not that kind of work. They're doing Java, they're doing other stuff, whatever they're doing. All right, so the developers actually themselves are actually good. They did AI for bots. They got all that stuff. So they did it in teams and built during their quiet times or special initiatives. So they have all this stuff going, but they have this one app. This is the case where now, do I need now, because they're running the Power Apps, do I need licenses for those 20 to 40 project managers? Actually, yes. For the project managers, for the Power Apps, for those points, because those things have to talk to SQL, I'm going to need a Power Apps license for each of those guys, all right? Unless I decide to change how I'm talking to it. Maybe I can say, hey, let's redesign it so it doesn't talk to SQL. Maybe it should just talk to a SharePoint list. I mean, why is SQL? Is there a join that we really need? Is that really necessary? Can I redo this and say, I'm just going to have use the Office 365 piece to make it happen? That would be great. But now, if I'm looking at this, I probably want to, I know it's 20 to 40, I would probably get to 20 licenses, right? This is, what we do. And essentially, when someone comes in and out and of who's project manager, I, as the admin, can go and reassign my license using the licensing ability in the admin screen to just bring them in and out. So I can control my costs that particular way. The Power App, the Power Automate piece to that, no problem. That's going to be included. So that's what I would do. Hey, and if you got one to share, guess what I have over here? This just came out in the Microsoft Docs area, and you'll see it in the well, this is the actual. If you're contributing, you would come over here to the GitHub site. There's actually an article which I co-authored. I authored with the help of John Liu, who helped me very much. In fact, some of these things have been vetted by Mr. Liu himself, another very famous MVP. Helped me put together some of this stuff. And so that's available. If you go to this particular link, you can contribute. I'm hoping that folks will contribute their samples so we can get like a hefty guide for people who's trying to think of what kind of licenses to use. Zip. So that's it. How about it? I fit in time.
Man,
right in time.
Right on time, but I got a question for you before you close down that slide.
Yes.
So question is, how do you grant permission to use a developed Canvas Power App ad hoc for a user using MS Flow and not the UI? I'm not sure I get it, but I really hope that you get that question.
Okay, so we're saying, or what we're saying is with MS Flow, we want to use Flow to actually one of its things that it's going to do, just like provisioning a website or provisioning a SharePoint or provisioning whatever, we want to like use the Flow to give somebody a license is what you're asking? That's what it sounds like.
I'm not sure, but maybe Franz, you can add some more details in the chat.
Right. So if I was to make if I was to like to automate to make, like a self-service situation, and remember, there is self-service you can just enable. All right. So when people start to use a Power App or start to create a flow, they will be given a dialog box that basically allows them to just do it.
Okay. I actually got more details. It's to give access to the app. So I think it's basically, can you manage Power Apps membership using Flow?
Ooh, that's a very good question.
So you can have, like, say, I don't know, add stuff in a list, goes through an approval, and if it's approved, okay, I'm going to add Ralph to use this app.
So I don't have that handy. I do recall seeing 2 or 3 blogs on exactly that, because that is a big, in fact, I'm going to tell you, that's a big request. If you think, remember that situation, literally the one I just brought up, right? The 20 or 40 people. Now imagine I want, as the administrator, I don't want to have to do that by hand every single time and give permission and go back and forth. Wouldn't it be nice if they just came in self-service, hit the button, and it happened? And yes, why not? In fact, we'll have to follow that one up, perhaps maybe when we post this in blog form and everything
When I'm
else.
going to share this by email, if you can send me the blogs or resources that you find, I'll send them to everybody.
Beautiful. But that one is a follow-up. But that one is definitely a very good question, and it has been asked, and I do recall somebody might have actually an answer for it. And if I find that, I will put that for you guys to include it with that with the information right away.
Awesome. And one last question. Do you know if Microsoft offers fast-track services for Power Platform governance and things like that? Or
so how does fast track service works? Just about anything you can think about that has to do with your Office 365 system. If you're trying to do fast track, they will provide, now whatever Microsoft doesn't provide directly, they will provide through credits that they will bring in a partner to take care of. Right? So if it's not Microsoft, it will be a partner that does it. I think you have to first qualify for the fast track services. And once you are, you present your problem, whatever it happens to be. And governance is a very common one. Migration is the other ones. But that particular one, absolutely, that falls within their mandate, that they would at least give you the options and how that would be addressed.
Awesome. That is it. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending and for the amazing questions. And thank you very much, Ralph, for taking the time to present this to the community and for all of the awesome resources you've been putting out lately.
Lately I'm trying to get in the ball.
I see you everywhere on LinkedIn, on Docs, on SlideShare, on everything. So thank you very much. And as promised, we'll be following up usually by tomorrow end of day with a link to the recording and a link to the slides and any other resources that Ralph wants to share. I'll add all of those links in the email you guys get.
Yes, very good.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great end of the week and stay safe out there.
Okay, au revoir all. Thank you very much.